Get in the shower or bath. This is all, lets you know you're in labor. You might be at home. Most likely you'll be at home during this stage. You might be at the hospital if your water did break or if you're being induced. But get in the shower or bath and just try to relax. And I think you guys should stay home as long as possible. This is my personal opinion. If your provider is okay with this, you don't have any medical reason not to. It's just like we talked about with the deer in the forest. If your labor is going to progress in a positive direction, if you are at the place where you feel most comfortable, where you have the most control. And so I would definitely suggest that you try to stay home as long as you can and get some rest. And this is all according to your provider and you guys discuss this. But ideally, and this is as a doula speaking too, just stay at home. There's no reason to run and jump into the car to the hospital. You guys are one of the only people who might be giving birth in a snowstorm. I mean, I guess some people might, March, but weather is. Are you guys listening to Tina?
Yeah, well, we're moving to Craig next week.
Oh.
I'm going to be coming and staying at his parents' place.
Good.
Probably the week before, maybe later, a little bit sooner, depending on how I feel.
Depending on how you feel, exactly. You have to do the in-law sort of stay. So usually you want to consider how long it takes to get to the hospital, etc. But typically you're not going to give birth in the car. This is your first baby. This does not typically happen. Second baby, maybe. My cousin just actually delivered his wife's baby at home because the midwife didn't make it. And it was an hour-long start to finish birth. So I wish I could have been there to see it. Anyway, so when to go to the hospital is always a question people ask. And like I said, consider the time of day. If it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you can do another 4 hours at home, great. Because then you don't have to park in the emergency room, going through the emergency room doors. You can, because that's fine, but it's not the way I want to walk into the hospital necessarily if I have the choice. So I believe, and you could tell me, you can walk in the front entrance starting at 6:30 or 6?
I think it's around 7 or 8.
7 or 8. What if you're coming in for a surgery though? And you have to get there super early.
Yeah, you probably could. I'm sorry, I don't know exactly what.
That's okay. That's okay.
But we have security there all the time, so
yep.
They can just open the doors for you.
Yes,
right.
exactly. That's true. But it's sort of nice to walk into the main entrance of the hospital rather than going through emergency room because this isn't necessarily an emergency, right? So, so you can consider the time of day. You also want your doctor to be nice and fresh, but if things are happening, you need to get going. So have mama talk to the OB and make sure everything's correct. So you want your OB on the phone to hear you talk through contraction. Okay, so Lindsay is talking to Bowman. And she's just saying, yeah, my water broke, or no, my water didn't break, but I'm having contractions. They're about 5 minutes apart. I'm gonna have one, I feel like I'm starting one right now, and she just keeps talking through the contraction. Bowman knows that Lindsay is maybe not right there about to have the baby. If Lindsay's sitting there saying, no, I can feel it really low, I'm kind of feeling my back, I'm feeling it right now, versus, just a minute, okay, hold on. That conversation, Bowman's gonna get a different read as far as what the situation is. If Dan calls, and Dan's like, I don't know, I think she had her last one was about 2 minutes ago, she seems to be doing okay, it's not gonna be the same information that Lindsay gives. So I would strongly urge you guys to call your provider, and you will most likely call their answering service and then they'll call you back. So I would strongly suggest mamas talk to the doctors, not dads, okay? No offense, dads, but really it's just a little bit more helpful to do it that way. So then you get to the hospital, and how do you make it yours? My strongest suggestion, if you have the time, is to get in there and realize and acknowledge that this is the room where your baby is going to take its first breath, or their first breath. This is going to be your space. So whether you bring little candles in that don't actually light, because we can't do that, but sort of those electric candles, or a diffuser like I have over there in the corner for some scent, or whatever your music, take ownership of this room, because it may not feel like a big deal, but this is the air that your baby will take its first breath from. So when you get in there, have a moment. And if it's not a rush, ask the nurses to leave for a second. They're going to do all this admission stuff and, take your blood pressure and your temperature and ask you a bunch of questions. If you can, just say, can we have a moment in this room before we do all this? Because this is really important for us to take ownership of the space. And hopefully you get a real good sense of who your nurse is when you're able to say that. And she's like, no, I got to do these things. At that point, you might say, can we talk about getting a different nurse? You know, something like that. That's totally fine, you can say that. But if she says, absolutely, I'll be right out here, I'm just going to do some charting out here, and then I'll be back in about 5 minutes, is that what you need? That's great, that's the nurse you want, okay? But take ownership of that space, because that is where your baby is going to be born, okay, hopefully. If you are strep B positive, which I talked about, you need to get on antibiotics. And so if you are strep B, even if your water hasn't broke, but if you're in labor, you need to go in and go to the hospital. So the doctors will tell you that. And the reason is because you need to have the antibiotics in your system so the baby gets a little dose of those. Okay? And then remember 411. So the number to remember is contractions are, this is when I think you go to the hospital. Contractions are no more than 4 minutes apart, lasting for at least a minute, with an established pattern for at least an hour. Okay? So if you're starting to notice your contractions are about 4 minutes apart consistently, lasting for a minute, and that pattern has been established for an hour, that's a good time to go to the hospital. Okay? You may feel differently. You may be more conservative, and that's totally fine. You figure out what your formula is. But I think that's a good formula. So we're going to review the stages of labor, and then we're going to be done. Okay? So stages of labor. Early labor is when our cervix goes from 1 to 4 centimeters. It's the longest and mildest stage. Contractions can last 30 to 45 seconds, and they're about 5 to 20 minutes apart. Okay? And this stage can last from 10 to 12 hours. So, what do we do during this stage? We sleep, if we can. Because, like she said there, Becky said in there, she's like excited, you don't want to sleep, and you can't really sleep, but you should. And so, this is the time to wrap up any loose ends, or just rest as much as you can. Drink all that fluid that we need you to drink. Take a bath. Call Mom, who lives in New York, and tell her to get on the plane. Or actually, it's me. I'm going to go see my sister in New York as soon as she gets together. And get things done. Pack. If you haven't packed before, take a walk. If you're me, you can go get your husband a 6-pack of beer because he lost his wallet the day before you were supposed to give labor, and he needed some beer. This is a true story. Can you go get me some beer? Really? Wait. Why don't you go get it? He's like, well, I can't find my wallet. I've been missing it for the last 2 days. I'm like, I think I'm in labor. And then he said, well, you can just check. And he's really not a jerk, but he goes, you can also, you know, I needed to get the car seat checked because you can go to the fire department to make sure it's installed. And I'm like, okay, I'll just go get the car seat checked too at the same time. And we were really behind the ball. Anyway, so you can do that. But yes, just try to stay comfortable and rest because this can be a long stage. And then we go to active labor. So that's our early labor. Then we go to active labor. And you saw it on the film. Things get a little bit more serious. It's on. Okay, and I remember when I went from early stage to active. And I remember being in the bath. And I had some of the bloody show. And not different than the mucus plug. But I had some bloody show. And I remember having some contractions about to being like, I don't know if I have a long way to go. And this is really hard. And I don't know if I can do this for when I get to the real stuff, because this is still feeling like small potatoes. I'm still at home, and I remember Jonah was asleep, and just sitting there like, man, I'm going to really let myself down because I really felt strongly about not having enough drill, and I'm really going to need one. There's no way. And that was my transition into active labor, which was things are getting a little more serious. I'm having a little bit harder time regulating my temperature. I'm having a harder time getting through these contractions. And I'm not really looking forward to this. Like in the early stage, you're like, whoa, hi, yeah, it's happening. And in active stage, it's not so much fun. And that's when I needed my support team. Okay, so that's when I needed to go get Jonah, wake him up, have him, you know, support me with some massage, with some breathing, with some, you know, emotional support. And so at this point, though, your cervix goes from 5 centimeters to 8 centimeters. And this is my little centimeter size. This is 1 centimeter, okay? 2, just so you know. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's about the end of our active stage. 8's officially the end of our active stage. Okay, so here we are. You have a muscle, a sphincter actually that's never moved and budged in its entire life. And it goes from here to here. It takes a while, okay? So when I have a doula client and the dads are saying, oh, I'll be and they're not saying in front of her, but they're sort of like, where do you think we're at here? This is a very huge process to move towards. And again, this is a sphincter that has never moved in its life, and it's moving this much. So this takes a long time. So during active labor, contractions last about 45 to 65 seconds, and they're about 3 to 5 minutes apart. And this stage could last 30 minutes to about 12 hours. Not usually 12 hours, that's a long time. But this is when things start to get a little serious. Mom gets a little more tired, and this is a little less fun than it was during that early labor stage. You can have some back labor because baby is descending further down, and like we talked about, when we know the baby is going to come out the face up, which is not the way we want it. That's posterior. We want an anterior baby with the face pointing, down towards the bed. It's going to press on your back, and that starts to hurt. So then we start talking about positions to kind of alleviate some of that. And hands and knees is where you want to be if you're feeling that back labor. And I've seen doctors and nurses do amazing little positions and contortions to try and turn baby, and usually they work. But this is where a doula or a really solid nurse can be really helpful and say, okay, so I want to try the corkscrew position because Molly told me in childbirth class that corkscrew was good if it was a posterior baby. Because then you can ask the nurses, where's that peanut ball? Because they have the birthing balls, but then they also